Pain. A word we often avoid, a feeling we desperately try to escape. Yet pain is a teacher. It carves into us lessons we cannot unlearn. Or so we think. But British author Graham Greene once wrote, "We forget very easily what gives us pain." In this video, we'll explore this profound psychological and philosophical idea, diving into the depths of memory, trauma, emotional avoidance, and human resilience. Why do we forget pain? Should we? And what happens when we do? Graham Greene, known for his complex characters and exploration of moral dilemmas, was a writer deeply interested in human suffering. When he said, "We forget very easily what gives us pain," he wasn't suggesting that pain disappears. He was highlighting something paradoxical. Pain should be unforgettable. It should shape our behaviors, teach us lessons, and guide our decisions. But more often than not, we repress it. We dull it. We pretend it never happened. Why? Psychologists call this motivated forgetting. Our mind, in an act of self-preservation, distances us from the sharp edge of suffering. We bury heartbreak, betrayal, grief, embarrassment deep in the psyche. But forgetting pain isn't as harmless as it seems. Why we forget pain? Let's begin by understanding why we forget pain. The answer lies in neuroscience, psychology, and survival. 1. Neurological perspective. Pain is processed in several regions of the brain: the anterior cingulate cortex, the prefrontal cortex, and the amygdala. Emotional pain activates many of the same regions as physical pain. But interestingly, when pain becomes chronic or traumatic, the brain finds ways to disconnect from the memory of it. This isn't dysfunction, it's design. If every memory of suffering remained fresh, we might collapse under its weight. 2. Psychological defense mechanisms. Sigmund Freud proposed mechanisms like repression and denial, ways the mind protects the self from being overwhelmed. When we experience pain that threatens our sense of identity, safety, or coherence, we may unconsciously forget it. For example, a child neglected by a parent might grow up remembering only the good times. A person abused in a relationship may, years later, romanticize that partner. A failure that once devastated us becomes a blurred lesson in growth. 3. Emotional numbing and dissociation. In extreme cases, like PTSD, the mind doesn't just forget pain, it blocks off whole memories. This is not weakness, it's the brain choosing survival. But even in everyday life, we forget pain surprisingly quickly. Think of women choosing to have a second child despite the agony of childbirth. Athletes pushing through injury time and again. People returning to toxic relationships after heartbreak. Why? Because remembering pain is painful, so we forget. Selectively, strategically. The dangers of forgetting pain. Forgetting pain might seem merciful, but it carries consequences. 1. Repetition of harm. If we forget what hurt us, we may walk right back into the same fire. You trust the same kind of manipulative person. You ignore the same red flags. You abandon boundaries you once fought to build. Graham Greene's words are a warning. If you forget what gave you pain, you are doomed to repeat it. 2. Lack of emotional growth. Pain contains data. When we ignore it, we rob ourselves of transformation. Pain tells us what matters to us, where we were vulnerable, what we truly need. Forgetting pain means forgetting the lesson. 3. Distorted self-perception. Forgetting pain may lead us to believe we were never hurt, we were never broken, we are always fine. But this illusion creates a fragile identity, one unprepared for life's future blows. The functions of remembering. What happens when we don't forget pain? When we choose to remember? 1. Pain as a teacher. Rumi once said, "The wound is the place where the light enters you." Remembering pain doesn't mean dwelling in suffering. It means mining it for wisdom. It means becoming conscious of patterns, choices, and unmet needs. 2. Pain as empathy. When we remember our own pain, we become more compassionate toward others. We can say, "I know what heartbreak feels like. I understand the weight of grief. You're not alone. Empathy emerges from remembered wounds. 3. Pain as motivation. Many world changes were propelled by pain. Viktor Frankl, surviving the Holocaust, gave us man's search for meaning. Oprah Winfrey, rising from childhood trauma, became a voice for millions. Malala Yousafzai, shot for learning, now fights for girls' education. They remembered and transformed that memory into mission. Forgetting versus healing. Let's make one thing clear: forgetting. Pain is not the same as healing. Forgetting is avoidance. Healing is integration. When we forget pain, it remains unresolved, hiding in the subconscious, leaking into behavior. But when we face pain, feel it and process it, we heal. This means talking about the pain, writing about it, crying through it, seeking therapy or spiritual guidance, creating art from it. Healing asks us not to forget, but to remember differently, with tenderness, with perspective, with strength. Why we sometimes must forget. And yet, forgetting can be necessary at times. In acute crisis, forgetting pain allows us to function. Soldiers in war, survivors of accidents, children in toxic homes, they often compartmentalize pain simply to survive. And sometimes, forgetting is the brain saying, "You're not ready to face this yet." We shouldn't judge forgetting, but we should be aware of it. There's wisdom in forgetting, but even greater wisdom in returning to the forgotten when we are ready. The role of time. Time plays a mysterious role in our relationship with pain. They say, time heals all wounds. But what does time really do? It dulls sharpness. It adds distance. It changes perspective. Time helps us revisit pain with gentler eyes, with understanding. We stop seeing ourselves as victims and start seeing ourselves as survivors. But time alone doesn't heal. Awareness does. Conscious reflection. Choosing to make sense of pain, not just move past it. That's the challenge, to remember pain, but not let it consume us, to let time soften it, without erasing it. The human struggle. Graham Greene's quote hits at something profoundly human. We forget very easily what gives us pain. We are creatures of contradiction. We avoid what hurts, but long to understand it. We run from discomfort, but grow because of it. We say never again, but often repeat the cycle. This is the human condition. We forget pain, not because we are careless, but because we are afraid. Afraid to feel too much, afraid to admit vulnerability, afraid of confronting our own fragility. But in doing so, we also forget the source of our strength, the fact that we endured, that we survived, that we felt deeply and kept going. Reclaiming pain. So how do we respond to Graham Greene's insight? We reclaim pain, we stop fearing it, we sit with it, listen to it, learn from it. Some practices: journaling. Write the story of your pain, not to relive it, but to understand it. Therapy. Let a professional guide you through the maze. Meditation. Observe painful thoughts without judgment. Art. Paint, sing, dance, create. Let pain become beauty. Pain is not your enemy. Forgetting pain, or unconsciously, might be. We forget very easily what gives us pain. But maybe we don't have to. Maybe we can remember, not to suffer again, but to become wiser, deeper, more alive. Because when we remember our pain, we remember our humanity.